Hello there. In the dispute over Brexit rules for the north of the Emerald Isle, so Northern Ireland, the EU Commission has initiated 4 new proceedings against the government in London. The Brussels authorities accused the United Kingdom on Friday of violating essential parts of the so-called Northern Ireland Protocol. Infringement procedures can lead to a claim before the European Court of Justice and result in a fine, and the ECJ is responsible. In the spirit of constructive cooperation, certain infringement procedures have been waived for more than a year, the EU authorities said. However, the UK's unwillingness to engage in meaningful discussion and the advanced progress of passage of the Northern Ireland Protocol Act by the UK Parliament run directly against that spirit, they say. Specifically, the allegations are about not complying with applicable customs regulations and not implementing certain EU regulations. Britain has now 2 months to respond. The dispute between the EU and Great Britain over the implementation of the Brexit rules has been going on for a long time. You have seen many videos here about this. Most recently, the EU Commission increased the pressure on London in June. At that time, the authority launched 2 new infringement procedures and resumed one other. Resumed. The Northern Ireland Protocol is part of the 2019 agreement on Britain's withdrawal from the EU. It stipulates that the north of the Emerald Isle, which is still part of the United Kingdom, will continue to follow the rules of the EU internal market and the European Customs Union. This was intended to prevent good checks at the border with EU member Ireland in order to prevent the conflict between supporters and opponents of a reunification of Ireland to flare up again. The reason for the new procedures, among others, that on Wednesday the British House of Commons adopted a controversial draft law on the Northern Ireland Protocol in the 3rd reading. With a planned law, the Brexit agreements on the north of the Emerald Isle can be unilaterally overridden by London. The EU Commission had previously shown itself to be extremely concerned about the project, and they did threaten consequences. However, before the law can come into force, it still has to go through the second chamber of Parliament, the House of Lords. That should happen after the summer recess. The draft is likely to meet with more resistance in the upper house. Should the government prevail with the plans, there should be serious upheavals with Brussels. In the worst case, a trade war threatens here. And the 2 candidates to succeed outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, and also ex-Finance Minister Rishi Sunak have so far shown no signs of seeking a de-escalation in the dispute, especially Truss, I would say. The government in London wants to use the bill to force Brussels to reopen the agreement on the special status for Northern Ireland that was only concluded in 2019 as part of the Brexit Treaty. The EU Commission strictly rules this out and instead wants to negotiate solutions within the framework of the existing agreement, and the EU made tons of possible things there. And even with the next Prime Minister, not much will change in this dispute with the EU. Because with all the crap that the Tories build up internally, they need the EU as an enemy. In the British Tories, the battle for the successor to the Prime Minister has flared up. All the candidates who were running or have already been eliminated do not bode well for the country and the party. And the London Fire Brigade was called out to the highest number since the Second World War during the height of the heat wave. They called for no bottles to be left on the grass and stuff like that last week. The infrastructure from train tracks to runways at airports could no longer cope with the high temperatures either. However, Prime Minister or Crime Minister Boris Johnson stayed away from a crisis meeting on the occasion of the heat wave. He had other things in mind. And you guessed it, parties. Inaugurations and a nice farewell party at the Chequers country estate for the loyal employees were in his schedule. Boris, we will never miss you, went through the Conservative Party as a deep sigh. But Johnson prefers to invest his manpower in intrigues. And this is not unusual for ousted prime ministers. In the last hours of power, Theresa May also thought up mean things for her own party, some of which were to the benefit of the country, such as the implementation of environmental regulations, which are traditionally frowned upon by the Conservatives. Johnson is of a different caliber. In order to get revenge, he goes through the lists of party members and handpicks the demonstrably most incompetent candidates to gift them with important posts. Whoever will be his successor will first have to start a wave of layoffs, which will generate strong headwinds from the start. Exploiting the Dunning-Kruger effect is a popular tool in politics and also in administration, because unqualified employees cannot recognize their own lack of qualifications. They fight tooth and nail for their jobs, usually to the great detriment of the affected organizations, which in the end often have no choice but to invent costly new posts to pacify the situation. At this point in the Tory Wars of the Roses, Johnson will already have a much higher paying post than the new Prime Minister and will be enjoying the dispute, and certainly not without comment. But his most important intrigues seem to fail. Johnson's motto was everyone but the traitor Rishi Sunak. That hasn't been particularly successful so far, because Sunak made it to the last duel. The latent right-wing extremists stoking the fear of wokeness that does not yet work as well in Great Britain as in the USA. It's better to have it a bit more traditional on the right. The longest-serving Secretary of State Liz Truss seems to fit that profile perfectly. She too has a passionately spelled-out anti-work attitude, but the ultimate goal is Maggie imitation, which Truss executes at the point of donning a pussy bow, like Thatcher wore in the 80s. Truss calls for an immediate tax cuts and all conceivable measures for the noble goal of the little state. She has her eye on an economic policy based on magical considerations, which is now only publicly presented by Thatcher advisor and iron-hard Brexit supporter Patrick Minford. There will be a £30 billion tax cut, the scrapping of environmental taxes and the like. This would then result in golden growth, with which all public tasks can be paid for. And not even the convinced neoliberal Rishi Sunak believes in magic tricks of this kind. And he said tax cuts were initially not possible. As a former finance minister, Sunak can play a good card here: fear of over-indebtedness. The threat of an over-indebted state, which many conservatives like to use, is also believed by the majority of party members. The fact that England has been permanently indebted since Queen Anne's reign seems to be a little-known specialist knowledge. Sunak can therefore warn unchallenged about inflation, as if prices were rising because public budgets are spending more now. Former Treasury Secretary Sunak, whose resignation meant Johnson's fall, is the only candidate polled to be in a direct confrontation with Labour leader Keir Starmer. That says more about the overcautious and hesitant Starmer, though as making Sunak the front runner, it's a bit like sending someone to swim with a millstone around their neck. Sunak's wife is an heiress to millions and, using her Indian heritage, prefers not to pay taxes in the UK. A move that will make the couple's hearts fly in the election campaign. Husbands and wife Rishi Sunak and Akshata Moody are estimated to have a combined fortune of £730 million and are already sparking debate in the country as to whether someone is simply too rich to be Prime Minister. Sunak was also fined for Corona parties. He doesn't come across as much of a party animal, but letting Johnson pull him along doesn't speak to his independence. The Tories could end up like England in the 100 Years' War. You win one battle after the other with flying colours, and in the end, you lose the war. Conservatives know that they only win elections so often because there is an electoral system tailored for them. Once Labour, Liberals and Greens have a large enough parliamentary majority, they could abolish the winner-takes-it-all system. With conventional majority elections, as in continental Europe, the Tories would almost always have a majority against them, which would correspond to social reality. The fear is that now, with Boris Johnson, the bar has finally been overstepped and that the bill will be presented in the next elections. In the television debate, the candidates had to put up with the question, why should one still believe the Tories? Contritely, the contenders for the top post admitted that the party seemed too self-serving and simply no longer trustworthy. However, no one could explain in any credible way how to win back trust. And meanwhile, the country, well, at least parts of it literally, is on fire. For ideological reasons, however, it's impossible for the Conservatives to do anything about the climate catastrophe that is becoming ever more apparent. They prefer to argue about when the best time to cut taxes is. And this shenanigans will go on until September 5th. And I'm looking forward to the TV debate tomorrow. I'll see you in my next video. Ich komme wieder.